Why Humans Avoid War, Part 23. Written by Space Paladin 15. Read by Daniel Million. I hurried back to my post by the holo display, eager to get as far away from the mangled bodies as possible. Through the lens of the viewport, I glimpsed the battle raging among the stars. While I had been preoccupied with the foot soldiers infiltrating our ship, the crewmates on the bridge had been clawing their way through a sea of enemies. A few hundred Allied vessels were tucked away at our side, trying to withstand a barrage of plasma fire. To their credit, the Terrans were hurling an equal amount of ammo at the hostiles. The humans were hoping to find any weakness to exploit, any chink in their armor, but it was to no avail. The Devourer shields were absorbing anything we threw at them. Our advance had slowed to a crawl, and we were on the verge of being pushed back. "General," Commander Rykov gave me a nod, his voice taut with pain. "Glad to have you in one piece." "Yes, others didn't share my good fortune," I muttered. The human's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean? We suffered casualties?" I averted my gaze, unable to look at him straight. "Not to my knowledge. I mean, your boys carved up the aliens nice and good. If I didn't know better, I'd think a wild animal got to them." "Oh, I see." Rykov sighed, massaging his forehead. "Human emotions can run hot. My orders were clear, but I suppose they got a bit carried away. I'm sorry you had to see that." I leaned over the command console, having nothing further to say on the matter. What was important now was completing the mission, and to do that, we needed to find a way through the enemy's stalwart defense line. But that seemed next to impossible now that they were privy to the Terran playbook. More human ships were slipping off the radar by the second. We needed to take drastic measures before we lost an entire fleet. What could we do that was completely unpredictable and would catch the Devourers off guard? Some sort of antimatter missile slammed into our hull, sending ripples through the flagship's frame. The overhead lights went out, replaced by a faint orange glow emanating from the floorboards. The computer's systems went offline for a moment before humming back to life. A few of the humans glanced around nervously. "Primary power source inoperable. Emergency generator activated," a mechanical voice said. "Shields at 12%. I shook my head in disbelief. This is the same ship that breezed through the Federation's orbital defenses without a scratch? That's not the first hit we took, just the straw that broke the camel's back," Rykov growled. The human idiom was lost on me, but I thought I understood the gist of it. "We're running out of time, then. Doesn't sound like we can take too many more hits. What do we do now?" "Earth is depending on us, General. We carry on. We fight to the last. There's nothing else to be done," he answered. "That's not going to be enough. They're one step ahead of us at every turn." "Well, what would you suggest exactly? We call on God to smite them?" "We retreat." "You've got to be kidding, General. I'd rather die than live a coward. I won't just let my planet burn." "I'm no coward. You know that. Breaking through their formation is impossible. We need to bait them forward, lure them to us. When they chase us, we outflank them." Rykov pursed his lips, considering my proposition. Despite the conviction in my voice, I wasn't convinced my ploy would be effective. But with the human ship count ticking lower, the shields waning, and our forward trajectory stalling, it was a necessary gamble. I just hoped the commander would arrive at the same conclusion. "Okay, so we drop back. What makes you think they'll follow us?" he asked after a long silence. I tried to imitate a human shrug. "Just a hunch. They're arrogant, and from what I've seen, they don't like to leave survivors." "A hunch, you say?" He frowned, casting a final glance at the holo display. "Very well. I'll have an encrypted message sent out to the fleet. For all our sakes, I hope this works." The commander called out a series of orders, setting the new plan into motion. The flagship banked sharply, reversing our course in a matter of seconds. We accelerated at full throttle. The quicker we got out of plasma range, the better. Our allies tailed after us, and the Devourers were left without any vessels to engage. The enemy remained stationary for a moment. No doubt they were bewildered by the human sudden departure. A coordinated retreat, while the fight was still in the balance, had to raise suspicions after all. But the chance to finish us off before we could regroup or jump to warp must have been too tempting. Our opponents tore after the withdrawing ships, guns blazing. I breathed a sigh of relief, even though that was only the first step in the plan. The next part was the most difficult, and would take the humans out of their comfort zone, acting like prey. The Devourers needed to smell weakness. The Terrans slowed their breakneck pace, allowing the pursuance to close the distance. An onslaught of missiles preceded the enemy's arrival, all bound for our largest battleships. I counted at least 20 warheads heading for the flagship, and hoped we could weather the storm once more. The first impact was almost undetectable, and it seemed that the damage might not be so bad. Then, several missiles struck in quick succession, and all hell broke loose. In their weakened state, our shields strained to keep up with such concentrated force. The floor quaked beneath my feet, powerful enough I could feel my teeth rattling. A terrible groan came from the ceiling above, as though a pipe had burst. Sparks darted up the wiring on the walls, leaving an acrid scent in the air. My guess was that the cooling system had taken the worst of it.
Fire reported in the engine room. Shields at negligible power.
The computer's voice was emotionless as always.
Evacuation of all personnel recommended.
Not happening. Rykov clapped his hands together, a maniacal smile on his face. His ship was literally on fire, and he was excited? It's our turn now, boys. Light 'em up! The Devourers zipped towards our position. Clearly, they had thrown all caution to the wind. The Terran vessels parted around them as they arrived, granting them access to the heart of the formation. We were swallowing them like a tasty morsel, and I don't think they even noticed. Well, not until they were already surrounded on all sides. After corralling the enemy, the humans nailed them with precise, relentless measures. Similar to how the flagship's shields had crumbled, the Devourer's defenses just weren't designed for a 360-degree bombardment. Their logical AI masters would have never planned for such a scenario, because there was no valid reason for the fleet to get boxed in like this. The humans softened up the enemy's shields first, grilling them with steady laser fire from all sides. This was followed by the deployment of missiles as soon as their defenses began to wane. The primates seemed to have an infinite supply of world-ending explosives, as usual. Massive battleships and nimble fighters alike blinked out of existence, no match for the combined power of antimatter and fission weapons. In panicked attempts to escape, some of the Devourer ships collided with each other. Those vessels also became little more than 1,000 fragments scattered across the darkness of night. "Set a course for their star at maximum speed," Rykov barked. "No time to waste." An ensign cleared her throat nervously. "Sir, our engine is overheating." The commander crossed his arms, frowning. "Did I stutter?" The flagship cruised through the remnants of the fleet, finally having a lane into the Devourer's system. I just hoped we could complete our mission before their offensive reached Earth. This was a race we couldn't afford to lose. The fate of humanity was hanging in the balance. A few enemy ships lingered behind while their partners walked into our trap, though these vessels were in the minority. A cluster of 5 battleships blocked our path, as that was all they could muster. There were no new orders on the bridge, not even an acknowledgement of their presence. The flagship sped on, full steam ahead. Our exposed frame was scorched with plasma fire, which burned a few holes into our metal hide. As atmosphere began to vent, automated processes sealed off the damaged ship sectors. It was going to take more than a few puncture marks to dispatch this Terran monstrosity. I winced as I realized we weren't slowing down at all, and we were mere seconds from plowing into the defensive quintet. The Devourer ships were vulnerable to ramming tactics, sure, but were there really no other options? If the humans wanted to piss away 1 trillion credits, they could have done that without wrecking their finest craft. Hell, forget the economic toll. With the fiery situation in the engine room, a jolt might be enough to turn us into a smoldering wreck. Even under normal circumstances, there was no guarantee we'd make it out in one piece. I knew it was hopeless to reason with the humans, since brushes with death seemed to be an incentive to them. All I could do was find something to hold on to and send a silent prayer to the universe. Even if we survived, this was going to be a bumpy ride. Why Humans Avoid War, Part 23. Written by Space Paladin 15. Read by Daniel Million.